for the invitation. I think this is probably one of the soundest gatherings I've ever attended. You've got the Daily Express, the campaigning journalism that fights inheritance tax and fights our membership of the European Union. You have the TaxPayers Alliance that I think is much more in touch with public opinion on the huge cost of living pressures that people are facing out there, and the taxes are absolutely unaffordable at the moment, and sound on the climate change issue. We have the Freedom Zone, which I think adds up to the real party conference fringe now. You go into the main area and it's all sponsored by massive lobby groups and people with expensive budgets but titles that send me to sleep. And it's here really where the debate is happening, and it's a huge tribute to Simon Richards that he's put this together for another year, and what a fascinating programme it is too. And these groups, of course, if you add them up, and we are supposed to be the right, and the right is not everybody's favourite side of the political divide. But as Peter Roborn recently wrote about in his brilliant Centre for Policy Studies pamphlet, The Guilty Men, the people who predicted the Euro's demise have been proved completely right. And if you look at the right over the last 3 decades now, in the 1980s, we stood up for free enterprise and said this was the way to save our economies. We were right there. In the 1990s, we said against real, almost fundamental opposition from the criminal justice and other establishment that prison would work. And finally, after 4 or 5 decades of crime rising, we turned the tide on that. Then we've been proved right about the euro, and now I think in this age we're going to be proven right about European membership full stop, and also that other issue of climate change. We're not only, I think, on the right side of the debate in these issues, I think we're also on the right side of public opinion. Thanks to the Daily Express, we have another poll today which underlines the extent to which the country really has had enough of the European project. Matthew Elliott mentioned the newspaper that we are producing and handing out 5,000 copies a day at the Tory conference, and that's the headline today, with a nice picture of William Hague. I just had the pleasure of giving him a copy, by the way. And, Tory voters tell Hague, leave the EU now. And the numbers, they're not close to being margin of error numbers. 68% of Conservatives want Britain to leave the European Union. 74%, 3/4, want a referendum on EU membership. This is an issue with overwhelming public support now on its side. I edit this website called ConservativeHome, and I'm regularly accused of having threads in the website infested by UKIP members because of the anti-EU remarks on the threads. And I think we do have a lot of UKIP visitors who spend a lot of time with us. But I think it's also true, and I think this is what these polls now teach us, is actually the outlook, the instinct of the average Conservative member on this fundamental issue of Europe is incredibly close to the views also of UKIP as well. Opinion is changing fast, not just at the grassroots, at the popular level. I think it's also beginning to change at the Commentator level as well. It's fascinating how the Commentator have been behind the curve on this issue. We've had a number of people, including Camilla Cavendish in the Times, Simon Jenkins in the Guardian, Matthew Paris again in the Times, all recently writing, questioning the European Union in more fundamental ways. And no one knows better really than Matthew Elliott how you need to trust the public opinion on these questions. Matthew, probably the most effective campaigner in the right in British politics today. His AV campaign was fought not according to the views and beliefs and the wise wisdom of the sages who write in our newspapers. He listened to public opinion and he fought that campaign on those guidelines. This man helped save our electoral system, and we should all be incredibly grateful for it. So where is, if this is the backdrop, if this is is where the public mood is. This is where the intellectual mood is. How does this relate to where the parliamentary party is? Douglas and his colleagues. Douglas is a better. I'll leave him to talk more about that. But and where is the Tory leadership on this? It seems to me that since coming to power, the Tory leadership has gone in two different directions, and not only on Europe. It's gone. So a lot of the ministers, a lot of the advisors have come face to face with the nature of the European project and how much it makes their life difficult. Steve Hilton, the Prime Minister's chief advisor, his guru, undertook an exercise in Whitehall where every paper that came across their desks were marked with a C in the corner if it was papers fundamentally related to the coalition's project, the coalition agreement. A W was put on documents related to Whitehall, and an E was put on documents that were just coming from the European bureaucracy. And only 40% of the papers that the government was dealing with was about their own agenda, marked with a C. Just under 30% was marked with a W, stuff just being generated by the domestic civil service. Over 30% of everything ministers were dealing with was coming from Europe. And people, therefore, like Steve Hilton, have been incredibly taken by this. And there is a significant group now, I think, at the top of the party who thinks that something fundamental does need to change in our relationship with the European Union. I don't think that's where the Prime Minister is. I think the Prime Minister, as Patrick suggested, doesn't want this issue. He wants it to go away. And I think in some levels he's right to want it to go away, because so long as we're in coalition with the Liberal Democrats, I think any fundamental change in our relationship is going to be difficult, because if there is a renegotiating process while Nick Clegg is at David Cameron's side, he will veto anything significant. It may be that events force a different change of pace and we have to renegotiate earlier if there is a fundamental collapse in the Eurozone. But it may be in our interest for this issue to be later in this Parliament rather than early. Final word, I think, on the Eurosceptic movement. I think its great weakness is it remains to a significant extent balkanised. I think there hasn't been a coherence to the movement for a long time. There's a People's Front of Judea character to it sometimes, with everybody having their different hobby horses. There's a lot of history and a lot of personal rivalries, a lot of egos, I'm afraid, in this Eurosceptic movement. And I think it's our own divisions and sometimes our own way we behave to one another that could be our greatest threat. The other side of the equation would love to represent us as extreme and divided, and that is, I think, their best card for winning this debate. The way we have to win this debate is to be coherent and to keep focused on the Taxpayers Alliance model, which is to look particularly at the cost of the European Union. I think this is where public opinion really moves. I'm completely with the Bill Cash view of all the sovereignty clauses, and I admire his ability to understand all the legal implications, and they're profoundly significant. But if you want to win public opinion, you look at the bottom line. And I think now, not just the democratic deficit, but at a fundamental level in these tough economic times, when we are seeing massive transfer of economic power to the east, Britain can no longer afford the cost